Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. I want to talk to you about Spider-Man No Way Home. I just saw it the other night, and I went to the drive-in to see it. There's a drive-in open around here in the winter, if you can believe that, so that I wouldn't have to go to an indoor theater and risk catching the dreaded, beer bug, as they call it. And I have to say, I don't understand the hype about this movie. I understand why people were hyped up before it came out and excited to see it, and it did look good in the trailer, but having seen it, I don't understand why everybody is gaga over it. I understand the box office because people swarmed to see it when it came out, so that makes sense that the opening weekend was very successful. That doesn't speak to the quality of the movie. Sometimes people forget that. They go, well, it's doing gangbusters. Yeah, that doesn't mean it's good. This means a bunch of people went to see it because they were excited to see it. Whether or not it has legs long term is going to determine whether or not, people are actually finding it to be good once word of mouth gets out and reviews and stuff. But yeah, I don't get the hype about this film from anyone who's seen it and thinks that it was fantastic, because I disagree. I don't think it was fantastic. First of all, it wasn't the movie that I feel the trailer promised us. And I may have misunderstood the trailer, but my impressions from the trailer were that even though Peter, and by the way, spoilers, spoilers galore follow. Even though Peter interferes with Doctor Strange's casting of the spell, which was supposed to make it so that everybody forgot that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, except apparently MJ, Aunt May, and Ned, according to Peter's edits. Even though that spell goes wrong, which we know from the trailer it goes wrong, and leads to incursions into the MCU by non-MCU characters, my understanding from the trailer was that the spell did in fact make everyone forget that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, except MJ, May, and Ned. I somehow didn't understand that the spell going wrong meant only that there would be incursions from other universes, and not also that people would in fact forget that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. I thought we were going to see both in the movie. I thought it was going to be a movie about everyone forgetting that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, and all these incursions happened because the spell was cast kind of unevenly or whatever. But it's not that. Nobody forgets that Peter Parker is Spider-Man because of that spell. The only thing that happens is it creates a situation where characters from other universes infiltrate the MCU. And the reason that was important to me is because I thought the movie was going to be about him. I thought that at least part of the movie was going to be about him having to, again, tell MJ who he is, tell Ned who he is, tell May who he is, because they're in the trailer and they know who he is. But I thought, okay, for part of the movie, they're not going to know, and we're going to have to see him tell them, and they're not going to believe him, and that's going to be, that's going to be part of the story. On top of this whole thing where he has to deal with, Green Goblin and Doc Ock and so forth. But that's not what happens. That part of the spell just doesn't happen. The intention of the spell does not occur at all. It just creates the situation where the characters come in. So, okay, I was disappointed with that. But then Doc Ock shows up and Green Goblin shows up, and you're like, okay, at least we're going to get that part of the movie where he spends the movie being menaced by these continued incursions. Sandman shows up, Electro shows up from these characters. So I thought we're going to see him engage with these characters in confrontations over the course of the whole movie. Nope. Doesn't happen. There's an initial confrontation with Doc Ock, and there's also an initial confrontation with Green Goblin, but those conflicts are over in a couple of minutes, and both of them are neutralized within minutes and held captive by Peter and Doctor Strange. or by Doctor Strange anyway. Oh, and Lizard as well. And from there, the rest of the movie is basically Peter trying to help them solve various problems. I guess actually Green Goblin isn't captured. He runs off, and then from the confrontation, and then Peter runs into him at the house where he goes to see May, because in his universe he knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. He goes to see May, and he basically says, you know, this other character, this other voice takes over sometimes, and it's crazy, but you know, it makes me do evil things, and you got to help me. So, which you know was true in Spider-Man 1, the Tobey Maguire picture. Osborn gets taken over by Green Goblin, even though he's himself not evil. Anyway, so Sandman, Electro, Lizard, Doc Ock are all captured, and Goblin basically goes to Peter for help. And then the bulk of the movie from there on is spent showing Peter and his friends try to help these characters so that, for example, Doc Ock isn't crazy anymore. They fix the thing in the back of his head. They try to help Electro rid himself of the excess charge of electricity that he now carries, which makes him Electro. They're trying to find a cure to turn Lizard normal again and to turn Sandman normal again. So the bulk of the rest of the movie is we see them trying to do this. Now, it's successful in the case of Doc Ock, and they do find the cures in the other cases. But, you know, because these are basically villains or people who are not exactly straight in the head, they end up saying, you know what, no, I don't want your cure. I don't want to be free of the electrical charge. I don't want to be not a sand guy. I don't want, you know, Lizard was never really on board with it. And so they sort of rebel and like attack Peter or try to get away. And they do end up getting away. And now Peter has to deal with a rogue Green Goblin. Osborn basically ends up being taken over by Goblin again and says, nope, I don't want to be cured. And he takes off. So the rest of the movie is, like I said, Peter trying to fix them. And then the last act is basically 3 or 4 of them, except for Doc Ock, basically go, nope, nope. And they escape and they start menacing people or whatever. In fact, they don't even do that. They're just gone. And Peter has to set about trying to find them and deliver the cure to them. But he's also up against Doctor Strange, who wants to just push a button on a box that he came up with that will just automatically send them back, which Peter doesn't want to do because he learns that if that happens, Osborn's going to go back and die at the hands of Spider-Man. Doc Ock's going to go back and die. And I guess, I don't know, the other guys are not going to have great lives either or whatever. So he doesn't want to just send them back. And he's at odds with Doctor Strange over that. And so there was that element. But then it's just like one scene where he says, no, I don't want to send them back. You have to send them back. No, I'm not going to send them back. If you don't send them back, the incursions are going to keep happening. He says, I don't care. I'm going to fix it. And then you don't see Doctor Strange until the very end of the movie. And by that point, Ned comes into possession of one of Doctor Strange's like magic rings and discovers that he himself is magic and can open portals, which is how they end up bringing Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire into the movie as Peter Parker Spider-Man through Ned portals. I shit you not. And then the 3 of them continue working on the cures together and a plan to get them together so that they can deliver the cures so that they can then send them back, but that they won't die, I guess, or let them live in this universe. I don't know. So yes, we see Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, and, you know, it was cool and everything, but it was a little too comic relief. Their dialogue was way too much nostalgia stuff. Their scenes were spent, oh, have you fought this villain? No, I haven't, but I fought that villain. Have you fought that villain? No, I fought a different villain. Oh, and your webs come out of your body? What? We have to have synthetic. Wait, yours are natural? You just whoosh, and it comes out, whatever. Wow, that's really weird. And does it only come out of your wrist? And, you know, And then there's comedy about, oh, I'm not as young as I used to be. Tobey Maguire says I cracked my, I messed up my back from too much swinging. And Tobey Maguire's like, and Andrew Garfield's like, oh yeah, I know what you mean. I can crack your back for you. And they do that. And they just, it's Peter Parker being Peter Parker with Peter Parker. They spent way too much time doing that. And the only time you see them in action, really, in this movie, after the first few minutes, when the first incursions happen, is the end. There's one battle at the end, and it's cool and everything, and there are cool moments. I think it's Andrew Garfield that ends up saving MJ from dying when she falls off the Statue of Liberty, in a sort of rehabilitation moment for when he didn't get to save his girlfriend in his film. So that was cool. And, some of the little jokes were cool, but it was too much of it. It was overdone, I thought. And on top of that, they spend far too much of this final conflict time in the Spidey suit without the stupid mask on, which is a thing now in superhero movies ever since Avengers, in which Captain America goes around without this stupid mask on for most of the Battle of New York. And they do it now on all the superhero TV shows. And they did it in this movie. And it's like, I know you want to see their faces. I know that in this case, especially, you want to be able to keep track of which one's Tobey Maguire and which one's Andrew Garfield and which one is Tom Holland. But they do that for a little while. But then when it comes down to the final thing, they shouldn't be having the masks off the whole time while they're waiting for the villains to show up, and they're just talking back and forth to each other. And you might think, well, why do they need to have the mask on? I don't know. Why do they need to have it on for the fight? Everybody knows who everybody is in this movie, even though Electro never did figure out that Peter Parker was Spider-Man in that movie. But anyway, the masks are off for the sake of having the actors' faces visible, both for audience purposes so that everybody knows who's who, and both because I think actors these days don't want to be stuck trying to act through a mask for longer than they need to be. And they also don't want to not have their face on camera in a way that I guess both Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield were more willing to do when they made their own Spider-Man movies, because you don't see them in the costume without the mask on for more than a few seconds during 3 movies each. So that just annoyed the crap out of me. I didn't think it was any great shakes. I thought the villains were underused. I thought the plot was boring. I wasn't sure that it made sense. They brought Doctor Strange into it, but then sidelined him. And, that makes sense because it's not his movie, but why bring him into it? Why didn't they come up with something else to affect this whole multiverse thing? I guess because it's Doctor Strange's bag. I don't know. It bothered me. I didn't like the Magic Ned thing. In the comics, he does eventually become Hobgoblin, but that's got nothing to do with magic. So what? I didn't get it at all. I really didn't. Other stuff happens that I didn't like. May dies. Didn't like that. And the ultimate resolution in the end for the incursion situation, which ends up, by the way, getting worse, even though you don't see any specific individuals cross over other than these few. Apparently, the whole time there have been other incursions, and the spell is threatening to collapse the barriers altogether by the end, and Doctor Strange can't fix it in any way other than doing the original spell, which is to make everyone forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. So in the end, we do end up having a Peter Parker that no one knows is Spider-Man, which of course is a dilemma for him because he's alone. And not only is he alone in that nobody knows his identity, he's alone in that nobody knows who he is. So MJ doesn't know Peter Parker. He's a stranger to her. He's a stranger to Ned. His Aunt May is deceased. Happy doesn't know him. He's a stranger to Happy. He's alone. If May hadn't died, he would at least have had her, I would think. Although even then, maybe if she were alive, she wouldn't know who he was, depending on the spell. But so yes, we get the Peter Parker that I thought we were going to get during the bulk of the film, which is a Peter Parker that nobody knows is Spider-Man, but we get him at the end. And what we end up seeing is a sad, lonely Peter Parker who has no friends, who's lost his girlfriend, and doesn't get any of that back by the end of the movie. So it ends on a bummer rather than, okay, it happens at the beginning and they fix it by the end. So, I mean, it was a great hero moment for Peter in that he says, no, you know what? If the only way to fix it is to basically foobar my life, then foobar my life. I'll take one for the team, do the heroic thing, do the right thing, since this is all my fault anyway. And that way, at least nobody else suffers. So it's good in that way for the character. But at the end of the movie, it's a sad ending. And who knows what's going to happen? This was a trilogy. It was the third film in a trilogy. So is there going to be a fourth one? We don't know. Is Spider-Man going to show up again in the MCU? We don't know. Is it going to be maybe part of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness? That's a possibility, but we don't know. So it may never get fixed. Even Strange doesn't know who he is now. Even Doctor Strange no longer knows who Peter Parker even is. So I didn't like this movie. Didn't hate it. Tom Holland's great in it. Marissa Tomei is good in it as usual. Zendaya is excellent in it. Ned is the guy that plays Ned is really good. He's funny. He's been good in the other two movies. He's good in this. Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield played their Peter Parkers just as well as they did before. But story-wise, it was just bad. And some of the technical stuff didn't make sense. Doc Ock says that he showed up there, finds himself in that universe, sort of right at the moment that he would have died in the story of Spider-Man 2, the second Tobey Maguire Spider-Man film. But Norman Osborn crosses over into the MCU, even though that character had already died at the end of Spider-Man 1 by the time Doc Ock dies at the end of Spider-Man 2. So they not only come from a different universe, they don't come from the same point in time in that universe. And it is the same universe because Doc Ock says, you know, Harry Osborn, you're dead. It could be another universe where he's also dead, but it's the same universe. It's the Tobey Maguire universe. So why did they come from different points in time? And there's further evidence of this as they didn't really do anything to de-age Tobey Maguire. Andrew Garfield wouldn't really need any de-aging to look like he looked in his movies, but they don't. And the characters are played as older. My back is messed up because I swing too long and I'm older now. And Doc Ock even says, well, he's Dr. Octavius by the end. He even says to the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, Peter, you're all grown up. So they all come from different points in time within their own universe. Doc Ock, Green Goblin, and the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. We don't really know what point in time Sandman comes across from. So it could be any particular time. Could be before the events of, well, it had to be after the events of Spider-Man 3, because that's when he becomes Sandman. So again, a different point in time from the other two villains and from Tobey Maguire's character. Lizard and Electro come from the Andrew Garfield universe, and we don't know what points in time they come from, but even there, it seems like a lot of time has passed because Andrew Garfield is a little bit older. So anyway, there were real problems with the technical aspects of it, at least from the standpoint of the Tobey Maguire universe. They came from the same universe, but each at different points in time from the universe. So I didn't understand how that worked. They don't really explain that. So I don't know. Didn't love it. Didn't love it. Found it confusing. I found the plot was just boring. For the most part, the other two Spider-Men were comic relief, basically, and spent way too much time being sort of comic relief and basically member berries. And I didn't like it. I don't think this movie was great. On a 5-star scale, I'd give it 3. And that's really all there is to it. I'm looking forward to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. That looks like it's going to be really good. Here's hoping it is. But that's all I have to say. So let me know what you think. Also, please like the video, make a comment, subscribe to the channel. It would be great if y'all would do that. I'll be back with other movie reviews. Until then, I wish you peace and long life.